Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Wild in His Arms by Jennifer Ryan. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Aria groaned at the knock on her door at the unforgivably rude hour of 9:43 a.m. Everyone she'd actually answered the door for knew she didn't get up before noon, not when her shifts ended at 2 a.m. or later most nights. Since she hadn't gone to sleep until 4, she burrowed into her pillow, hoping the asshole at her door left so she could get some more sleep. The knock came again, this time more insistent and persistent. She ignored it again until she heard a gruff voice shout, "Aria, it's me!" Yeah, that voice made her belly quiver with anticipation and her heart leap. It made her conjure one dirty thought after the next of what that man who owned that voice could do to her body. And right now it made her tighten her thighs as heat bloomed between her legs. "Aria!" Another round of pounding on her door, this time with a dose of irritation. Yeah, well, she had reason to be upset too, even if she still desperately wanted him. Stupid hormones. She'd texted him 16 days ago. 16. And heard nothing back. All of a sudden, he can't wait to see me? It wasn't uncommon for them to go days between a text or call. They lived in different states, worked long hours, but 16 days. It was the punctuation mark on their long distance relationship, if you could call it that anymore. This past stretch of no communication was the longest, but certainly not the only time they'd gone without speaking for days or even more than a week. She threw off the covers and sat up, finger combing her hair away from her face. Nick had a demanding job with the FBI. He lived in Montana. He traveled for work. Well, she had a demanding job too. She lived in Wyoming. Her family and business were here, and because of that, and the fact that Nick's brother Mason was married to Aria's sister Lyric, it meant that Nick came to town to see her when he had time and wanted to visit his brother too. In the beginning, he found the time to come often, a few times a month. It gave them time to get to know each other in between having the best sex ever, because they gave in to their desires so easily. And after those mind-blowing moments, they whispered secrets in the dark. She'd never shared so much of herself or been so desperate to learn everything about someone else. She stood and headed for the door. After a bad breakup with her ex, because the asshole cheated on her, she hadn't wanted anything serious. The spark that ignited between her and Nick when they met was all she thought she needed. Well, that and the fireworks in the bedroom. She loved losing herself in his arms. He wanted her. He treated her like she was the sexiest woman he'd ever seen. Like he needed her to blot out all the bad he saw on the job with the amazing way she made him feel. He made her feel that way too. Their stolen moments, a day here, 2 days there, were enough until they weren't even close to what she thought they could have if they truly committed to each other. She started catching feelings that very first night they snuck off together, feelings that grew each and every time he showed up and smiled that smile and looked at her like she was his every dream come true. In the beginning, she wanted to believe it was just sex, a bit of fun, but he blew her mind each and every time. Multiple orgasms do that to a girl. But there was something more there in the morning after that first time when they stood in her open front door, and he turned to say goodbye and instead said, "I don't want this to be a one-time thing, and I can't make any promises because I don't live here, and my job is crazy demanding. I don't want to go, but I can't stay." She'd fallen for his open heart and blatant honesty. "Then I'll see you when I see you." She delivered that line with a sexy smile, letting him know she'd be there when he came back, happy to take him into her arms for however long it lasted. But now, months later, her sister married to his brother and pregnant. Jack's married and expecting a baby too. And Melody, her baby sister, about to be the next one down the aisle, and her and Nick still in the same place they always were. Always happy to see each other and fall into bed, but never any closer. No promises made, no plans for the future. What the hell were they doing? What were they to each other? Lovers, yes. Friends, sorta. They mostly lived in the moment. And when she opened the door and stared into his tired eyes and handsome face, she knew this was the last time they'd be together like this. Because damn, he looked good and she wanted him desperately. but she couldn't keep doing this to herself, because every time he left, he took a piece of her with him. Soon there'd be nothing left of her. This time had to be goodbye. Because she still wanted to be a wife and mother. More than that, she wanted a man who loved her like the air he breathed. And while she felt that kind of connection to Nick, he'd never shared his feelings. Neither had she. She'd done that once and got burned, but he had to know, right? Did Nick know she loved him? Probably not. They didn't talk about such things. She knew he cared about her. He couldn't fake that in bed. He wasn't using her. He genuinely enjoyed being with her, and she felt the same about him. But being the person who gave him comfort and connection and orgasms didn't fulfill her desire to be someone's everything. Please don't be mad at me. Those words burst out of Nick's mouth the second she opened the door and took in his rumpled thermal long-sleeve shirt, black jeans, scuffed work boots, and the shiny badge at his waist. He wasn't wearing his gun, but she bet he had it locked up in his car. And if he was wearing the badge, she bet he was here for work, not necessarily just to see her, which made this a happy, mostly coincidence. Or something. She wasn't really fully awake or thinking clearly with her hormones on a rampage, begging for her to drag him into her bed. And, oh yeah, why would his being here make her mad? Good morning? She scratched her head and wondered if her long dark hair was as messy as it felt. Nick stepped close, cupped her cheek in one hand, and kissed her softly. Morning. You look good enough to eat, and I'm so hungry. Nick looked her up and down and then backed her into her living space above the bar, kicking the door shut, his eyes devouring her from head to toe in her simple black tank top and purple lace-trimmed panties. He bent his knees, wrapped his arms around her, under her arms, lifted her up, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he kissed her like he would never stop. He walked them to her bed on the other side of the apartment, kneeled on the edge of the bed, then fell forward with her. They hit the mattress with a bounce. Nick making sure he didn't crush her by taking most of his weight on his forearms as his impressive erection pressed against her soft center. Fuck, you feel good. He rubbed his long length against her soft folds, making them both groan with pleasure. In between kisses, she asked, What are you doing here? He kissed her again, his tongue thrusting in her mouth in time to the way he rocked his cock against her. Last night, he said between deep penetrating kisses. Then he lifted his head and looked down at her. Your sister was kidnapped. What? Aria gasped, her eyes going wide as she attempted to jump up and go find her sister, even though she didn't even know which one. Nick held her down beneath him. Melody is fine, I swear it. She's in the hospital, just for observation, he added quickly, kissing her forehead, her cheek. She's asleep right now. You can see her in a couple of hours. He paused, searching her eyes. Until then, be here with me. He kissed her again. Please? That really did sound like he was begging. I need you so much. He kissed her again, his tongue sliding against hers. Then I'll tell you everything. He dove back in for another kiss as Aria tried to wrap her head around everything he'd just said through the haze of lust and need he made her feel as he trailed kisses down her neck and chest to her breasts, where he sucked her tight nipple into his mouth over her tank. Nick, please! She wasn't sure what she was begging for at the moment. More information about her sister or more of his mouth? Both? He looked up at her from between her legs. You and me now. Talk later. I swear she's safe and okay. She gave in the second he tore her panties down her legs, then dove into her pussy with his tongue like a man on a mission. And the only thing he seemed to want was her writhing on the bed. She could get behind that, knowing he'd never lie about her sister's condition. She sank her fingers into his golden hair, holding him to her as he licked and sucked her clit exactly the way she liked it. He slid one finger, then two, into her wet channel, stroking her as he circled her clit with his tongue, once, twice, and then setting off the orgasm he'd so masterfully built inside her. And he wasn't done. He shoved off all his clothes, tossing them to the floor as she recovered enough to enjoy the show as he revealed every chiseled muscle in his shoulders, arms, chest, and abs. That V leading to his groin always made her mouth water, and his thick, hard cock made her pussy clench like it couldn't wait to be wrapped around him. She didn't want to give that up. She didn't want to give him up. But he'd made it clear his job came first. He was here now, but she knew he'd be leaving again. So she'd hold on to him in this moment as long as she could. He pulled her tank over her head, then planted his hands on either side of her shoulders and looked down at her, his eyes filled with appreciation and desire. God, I've missed you. He gently ran his fingertips down her sternum and between her breasts as he watched his fingertips glide over her skin. I think about you all the time. You're a distraction in my every fantasy. She gaped at him. You think about me? His head snapped up and his hazel eyes met hers. Yes, always. Yet he hadn't texted or called in 16 days. He quirked up an eyebrow. Don't you think about me? She met his gaze and gave him the truth. I try not to. It makes me sad you're not here. Still, she thought about him all the time, which made her sad all the time because he wasn't here, but she didn't tell him that. Let's make the most of our time together right now. That's all they'd done for months. His lips closed over her breast. He licked and sucked her tight nipple, making her moan and arch up, offering his greedy mouth everything he wanted. His hands clamped around her thighs and pushed them wide. You taste so good. He planted one hand next to her head as he leaned over her. But right now I need to be inside you. He notched the head of his cock at her wet entrance, kissed her softly, and thrust into the hilt. Fuck, you feel so good, like you were made just for me. She felt like he'd been made for her, too. But even his words didn't make her feel like he'd claimed her because she already knew he wasn't staying. All they had was right now. So she took full advantage, locking her legs around his waist, holding him close with her hands on his back, her nails digging in. She soaked up every brush of his skin against hers, every breath they shared as they kissed, every stroke of his cock gliding in and out of her tight channel, every sigh and moan, every sultry, needy look they shared. And when the climax hit them both, and for the single moment time stopped as their bodies hit that perfect peak, she knew that nothing would ever be as good or enough without him. But that didn't mean she didn't deserve more than just these perfect moments they shared. She loved them. She loved him. But she couldn't keep him. And she couldn't keep hurting herself and denying what she really wanted. Nick nuzzled her neck and kissed her softly behind the ear. I've missed you. She still had her legs wrapped around his waist and his arms over his shoulders. She hugged him hard. I miss you too, every second of the day. Nick rolled to his side and pulled her with him, so she ended up resting her head on his shoulder as he held her close to his side with one strong arm. No condom cleanup needed. They talked about her having an IUD and them both being tested. Her after she found out her ex had cheated on her. Him at his last physical. They had total trust and faith in each other that they weren't seeing anyone else while they were together seeing each other, though sometimes she wondered if he did see other people when the silences between them grew so long. But knowing her history, he wouldn't do that to her. He'd promised after the first night they were together. He told her he saw too many people doing bad things in his job, and he'd never hurt her like that, when all he had to say was it was over to spare her that betrayal. Tell me, she prompted, demanding the details he put on pause. He held her tighter. Fox called Mason last night to tell him that someone kidnapped Melody, most likely for a big ransom. Mason got the police involved and called me for backup in case we were dealing with someone dangerous, which she translated to someone willing to kill Melody if they didn't get their money. Fox owned his own software company and had opened 2 adult learning centers for people aging out of the foster care system who needed to learn a skill fast so they could get a decent job and support themselves. She knew he had money, but enough to make someone kidnap Melody for a ransom? Who kidnapped her? You probably know Brian and Josh from the bar. Fox's mom used them and a woman who worked with Fox, Amy, a chef teaching at the center, to kidnap Melody. Oh, God. This all happened a couple hours ago. She leaned up on her elbow and stared down at him, 100% believing her little sister would try to kick some ass if someone got out of line with her. Nick brushed her hair away from her face and behind her ear. Don't worry. We got to her in time, and Fox clocked Josh for touching Melody. He brushed his fingers through her hair again. Melody was checked out by a doctor. Mason went home to be with Lyric and fill her in. I came here to see you before I head back to work. I wanted you to hear it from me. And you didn't want me to find out you were here helping Mason and didn't come to see me? Nick rolled to his side and looked her in the eyes. I couldn't wait to see you. His smile always warmed her heart. Like Mason, he didn't smile enough. How long can you stay? The hope in her heart died a quick death when Nick checked his watch and frowned. My helicopter ride will be in the airport in an hour, which meant he needed to leave soon because it was a 40-minute drive. She fell back on the pillow and stared up at the ceiling. I guess you better get going then. Nick leaned over her. Don't be like that. He nuzzled his nose against her cheek, trying to coax her back to happy so that when he left, everything between them was good. But it wasn't. Don't be like, what, Nick? Disappointed? Sad? That's how I feel. You came running when Mason called, and I appreciate it because it was for my sister. I'm sure last night was scary as hell for her and everyone else trying to find her, but for me, you show up acting like you can't stand not to have me in your arms the second I open the door after you haven't called or texted in more than 2 weeks. You're not even trying anymore to pretend this isn't just sex, and when you're home, I'm out of sight, out of mind. Nick stared down at her, his eyes filled with anger and what she hoped was regret to go with the heaping dose of frustration coming off him. Is that what you think of me, that I treat my brother's wife's sister like some booty call? Seriously? Brother's wife's sister, not girlfriend. That said a lot. Why haven't you contacted me at all for the past 2 weeks? What the hell am I supposed to think when I get nothing but silence from you? When our whole whatever this is we're doing revolves around you, your schedule, your job, your availability to see me. Nick turned it right back on her. Why haven't you contacted me to say you missed me, that you wanted me to come, that you were willing to drive up to see me? Now we're playing games with each other? She rolled out of bed and found her tank on the floor and pulled it on. Nick sat on the edge of the bed and stared over at her. I'm not playing games. I'm asking you why you stewed on this instead of simply calling me. She pulled on her panties, crossed her arms under her breasts, and stared at the floor. Because your silence spoke volumes, and I want more. I deserve more. Nick dragged on his boxer briefs, then his jeans, and let out a frustrated breath. You're right, you do. I was busy on a new case, one that is taking up a lot of my time, and that's no excuse. He put on his socks and shoes. Every time I wanted to reach out, it was late at night. I knew you were working at the bar. I kept telling myself I'll call her tomorrow at lunch when she wakes up. But then you got busy and time got away from us. Yes. She pulled out a pair of leggings. I get that your job is important. Lives are on the line. And yeah, I'm just a bartender. He stopped in the middle of putting on his shirt, his arms in both of the sleeves in front of him, and turned to pin her in his gaze. You're more than that, he growled. Fine, but the thing is, Nick, I have no idea what we are to each other. Whatever this is that we're doing isn't enough. My sisters and brother have found their someone who will never let them go. I want that too. But all I am is lonely. He pulled on his shirt and adjusted his belt and badge. I know this isn't easy, but we have something good here.